Yo, what's going on, golf fans? It's your boy, Gsluke, with our DFS and prop stream for the Genesis Invitational. Going to get you ready for all of your exposure this week. But first off, I'll look at the weather, some strategy for DFS and ownership, and then towards the end, a complete deep dive of the prop and the betting side too, to get you ready for your round one props too. So that'll include the prize picks and underdog boards, any bets that you guys want us to go through together. And then, of course, throughout the entire live stream, any players that you want my thoughts on as well. It's meant to be the last second live stream to get anything that you're curious about out and handled before tomorrow's lock. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. But like I said, anything that you're curious about that we're not going to touch on together, that's what the live chat is for. And you can see what's already hot down there. We got rushing yard in the chat. Welcome on in. Yeah, lift, clean, and place. Definitely a possibility for round one, maybe even round two as well. You got Alan in the chat. Welcome on in. I appreciate the kind words calling me the people's champion. Let's get after it for the next few days. We got Anthony, James in the chat. Also, Jordan, welcome on in. Any questions we're going to get to a little bit later, but feel free to throw those in the chat, like I said, and let's get those like numbers up. Smash it if you guys haven't already. Also, subscribe to the channel, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing going. We got Reality Lime, also Jake in the chat, Jay as well, and I'll get to some of your questions a bit later on. But we're going to start off with a look at the golf course and the weather, which we already knew it's going to be super soft, but that's what we've gotten over the last few days. The course is soft. They've gotten a lot of rain. In fact, tomorrow they're calling for another inch of rain at Riviera. So the golf course, which is already 7,400 yards, is going to probably play even longer than that in reality. There's not going to be the kind of rollouts that we typically see at Riviera, which will slightly increase this fairway percentage, but it's going to make the golf course play to more of that bomber mindset. So that's why on a Monday, we were looking for guys above average in the driving distance. I think par 5 scoring is really going to come into play as well. And I think maybe the iron aspect could be a little bit easier. So around the green could be discounted a bit, but that second shot and throwing those darts is also good to be a big part of the process. So I think ball striking is already the name of the game for Riviera, is probably even more so the case this time around. But when we take a look at the forecast for tomorrow, the scoring might not be as good right off the bat. I say that because there's going to be some rain in the morning and then heavier winds in the afternoon. And although I think there's a chance that they have to stop play, but if the rain is pretty substantial there during the morning, reason for that is that the course is already waterlogged. So any kind of rain on top of that is going to have a hard time draining. So maybe they do delay the start until the afternoon. I think that could be a possibility. But even then, it's going to be a soft course, but playing under 10 to 15 mile an hour winds. So I think scoring averages pretty similar to what we got the last couple of years is going to be what we get for Thursday. But once they get to Friday through Sunday, pin locations are going to get tough, especially for round 4. But you're going to see these guys play to probably a 4 to 5 birdie average per round, which is not typically what we get at the Genesis. It's usually closer to 3 or 3.5 birdies or better per round. But you can see on a Friday, the forecast gets a lot calmer. In fact, if we go to the GFS, which is a little bit better for like 2 to 3 days out, Friday looks completely calm. That plus a soft golf course is going to be a dart fest. Saturday, the same thing. And then Sunday, although the Sunday pin setup will be a little bit more tucked, you'd have to think, it looks warm and calm by the time we get to the end of the weekend. So I think it could be a lower scoring Genesis as a result. And some of the bite of these greens, they have a lot of slope to them. And that's really the strategic aspect that you have to this golf course is going to get kind of taken away. When you have the soft greens, you're able to throw flop shots up and stop them within 3 or 4 paces of where they land. You don't have as much fear factor when it comes to those kind of a slope. So I don't think it's going to change our strategy that much. To talk about that for DFS, we could potentially see an edge tomorrow, but in my opinion, it's really hard to narrow down because, you could say that playing in the rain in the morning might be easier, but that could also lead to some problems of its own, right? Playing in the rain is really hard if you're getting water on your club face. You could also say that maybe there's a delay in that the PM wave that gets pushed into Friday could be the better way to go about it. But there's no defined waves that we have here, right? When we're talking AM versus PM wave, we're talking first versus the second half. And unless you're comparing the very first starter tomorrow to the very last guy off, like the Jordan Spieths, the Scotty Schefflers that are towards the very end of the tee times, you're not going to get a big difference when it goes from player to player. So I really think that Thursday is a wash, in my opinion, at least based on how I'm approaching it for this sort of a slate. I would say that if you're 150 maxer like myself, I can make an argument for trying to stack the really early guys. I can also make an argument for wanting to stack the really late guys. So if you wanted to take 10 to maybe 15% of your lineups take 7 to 8 towards either direction and stack it with some early or late starters, I wouldn't necessarily be against that. But that's only 10 to 15% of your lineups. I wouldn't be doing anything substantial with the weather here, as again, you don't have that 2 to 3 hour window between the two waves to deal with. And even then, it's sketchy and it's speculative at the very best for what you're going to get tomorrow. So if you want to play with the weather, you can. I'm personally not making it a big part of my process. The much bigger part of it, and the thing that I've really been incorporating into my process for this week, is driving distance being a little bit more important than I think the second shot. I think iron play was already going to be an extremely important factor in your modeling, but with the Dart Fest, especially from Friday through Sunday, guys that can gain 2 to 3 strokes per round on approach might even be gaining closer to 4 or 5 strokes this week because of the ability to hit the ball to 3 to 5 feet. And these greens are hard to putt. So when you're putting the ball to 3 to 5 foot and giving yourself an absolute gimme for birdie, that really pays off at this sort of a track. So that's what I'll say about the golf course, the setup from the weather perspective. We'll be keeping an eye on that first round scoring average and perhaps how the golf course changes throughout the day, so that we can use that for rounds Friday through Sunday showdown. Because for the first day, if I was playing showdown, I don't even know which side I would stack. In fact, I would probably play it pretty flat with all the uncertainty that we have. But the one thing we can do after tomorrow is to take the information and all the data that we get from the first round, and we'll be able to use that for the rest of the week going forward. So, by the way, if you didn't know, we do have round 2 through 4 live streams here on the channel. We cover showdown, also props and betting through Friday through Sunday. So if you guys haven't already checked those out, I would highly recommend doing so. What we're going to do next is we're going to go through ownership at the top end of the board, because that's the biggest edge that we have with PGA DFS. Oftentimes weather is one of the first go-tos that we have from that perspective. But even when we don't have a weather edge to lean into like what we have here, we're always going to have that game theory component, trying to play against the rest of the field, especially on a sport that is this hard to predict like what we have on golf. We want to know what the rest of the field is doing so that we can account for that in our lineups. And with your 9-10K players, you don't have to fade all these guys just because they're getting some steam, but it does make them slightly a worse play, as compared to somebody that's maybe a little bit lower owned. So we'll talk through some of the guys getting some extra steam. Specifically, to be the players from 8K plus that we're going through here together. By the way, the spreadsheet that we're going through is from my Patreon page. I just want to throw that out there to everyone in the chat. If you guys want to download this for all my projections, my entire player pool for this week, also all the research tools that we're going to use for your deep dives, you can find over there as well via the link in the description of the video. There's a link down there, the Golf DFS tier. It's how you get access to everything that you're seeing here. And of course, everything that is blacked out that you can see here is not on the version on my Patreon page. So it's got everyone I'm using in my 150 max lineups. It's got modeling projections for every single player that's teeing it up, as well as recent form, event history, shots gained metrics over the last 24 and last 12 measured rounds, which we're going to use for some of the deep dives and questions that you have in the chat. So we're going to talk ownership here for like 5, maybe 10 minutes, give you the idea where everyone else is going. And then we're going to cycle into those player deep dives that you're looking for. So like I was mentioning off the bat, if there's anyone that you're curious about that you want some last second information on, that's what you want to do in the live chat. And that can be, shots gained metrics we'll use for these deep dives. We'll talk event history where it's pertinent on some of these players that have actually been to Riviera over the years. You name it. But let me get a sip of this Coke. Let's talk through the ownership numbers, and then we'll catch up on the questions here in just a moment or so. How to catch my breath. That was a long one there. Let's go through this ownership thing. So number one would be a Scotty Scheffler at $14,300. And him and Rory, I have at a similar ownership mark at about 20%, which makes sense. I mean, both are quality plays on paper. I think everyone's projections are obviously going to spit out Scotty Scheffler as number one, but he is going to cost you $3,000 more than a Rory. And I think most people's projections would also have Rory McIlroy as clearly the second best player on the slate. So that's where I'm at. You guys know I love Rory McIlroy as a core play. I think the wet golf course at playing longer really plays into his skill set. But a Scotty Scheffler is also going to be usable and somebody that I'm using in quite a few lineups too. So you can see, although they are the chalkiest options that we have towards the top end of the board, that's not scaring me off of them in some of my exposure. Because if you're going to use somebody that is getting that extra steam, you want to do it with the best players on the field. You don't want it to be some slapdicks that are getting some extra steam because somebody in the industry is talking them up. The 6, 7K range guys that you're seeing at 10 to 15% ownership scare me a whole lot more than a Scotty or a Rory at 20%. In fact, you can make an argument that a Scotty at 20% is vastly underowned compared to where he should be. And even the same thing with somebody like a Rory McIlroy. So Fleetwood, a Xander, you might be tempted to call these guys pivots, but really 16% is about the average in this sort of a range. The only pivots, I would say, from 9K plus that I would qualify as that, and really it's sketchy to even call these guys that, would be a Russell Henley and maybe a Colin Morikawa, who I've got at 13.1%. But even then, the only differentiation that you're getting off of a Scotty and a Rory is about 40% differentiation, right? They're like, 40% higher owned in comparison than some of these other players. Whereas when we get to the 6 and 7K range and you've got those 15 percenters, they're priced around guys that are 2 to 3% owned. And rather than just a 40% increase in ownership, you're talking about a 400 to a 500% increase in ownership at times. So that's why I say, like, if you're going to make your pivots, it's better to do it the further down the board that you get. And, if you like some pivots down low and pivots up top, that's okay in a large field GPP. You can use pivots at 4, even 5 spots in your lineups, but that could be looked at as overdoing it. You don't have to have that many pivots. 2 to 3 is normally enough to get the differentiation that you're hoping for. But like I said, my favorite spot to do it is when you get further down in the pricing. But it's still important to know where the rest of the field is going. Like on guys like Hideki or Patrick Cantlay that are getting some steam. Hideki's got it because of the form. He's number 4 in the field, and he outshines guys like a Henley from that department. Also, even a Morikawa off a win. Hideki's got the better shots gained per round over the last 12. And Cantlay's got some of the best course history around Riviera. So that's part of the reason why I've got him in about 16.6%. And even outweighing a Siwoo Kim, who doesn't have the same kind of course history, you can see is number 8 in recent form ranking. So this is where you're starting to get some of those course horses coming in. But the 8K range is incredibly spread out. You've got maybe a Gotterup, a Knapp, a Fitzpatrick, a little chalky in that range. But even your lower owned guys are still 10% owned, like a Ricky Fowler, still a 10% owned Luddy O'Bear, who I've got at $8,300. I love Luddy this week, by the way. In fact, bet him outright at plus 4,000. Got that to 44 to 1 with a 10% boost. But even then, you're not getting as much differentiation as you can down low. So that's why I'm not stressing as much about guys like a Jake Knapp, for example, who I still like, despite him getting quite a bit of steam. But we knew that on a Monday. We knew the shots gained metrics, the course fit, the putting, the long distance, which is really going to play well on a wet week like this, was going to get other people onto him. And, it's okay to have some of these chalky guys in there when there's some of your favorite players that you were getting on. Like, for example, I hate to spill the beans on my entire player pool, but a Matt Fitzpatrick, he's got excellent ball striking numbers. Like, I don't want to completely give it away, but like there's a chance I'm still playing that sort of a guy if he was catching my eye on a Monday. Or, for example, a Cantlay's course history might still make him a decent play despite him getting that kind of ownership. But if you're finding yourself rounding out your player pool on a Wednesday and you're trying to get like 3 or 4 guys into your player pool so that you can make a full set of 150, if you're trying to add a few guys, they shouldn't be those 15 to 20 percenters. Like a Knapp, a Fitzpatrick, even a McNeely, I'd say at like 15.5%. These sort of guys are the ones that you should have already been on if they're going to be in your lineups. Because if you're going to use somebody that's 15 to 20% owned, you're talking about a 30 to a 40% investment in your lineups to get the 2x leverage that a lot of people are looking for. And, to use somebody in a third or even close to half of your lineups, like you have to on those guys, it takes somebody that's actually a good player, like a stud, ideally, that you'd be comfortable doing that with, which is why I don't do it with guys that are further down there. So that's the 8K mark. You guys can see the rest of the 8K range on there, but it's really spread out outside of the 3, maybe 4 guys that are closer to 15 to 17.5%. But just like the 9 and 10K range, there's not enough spread in my projections here for me to warrant really making a lot of pivots from the game theory perspective. So even more so than most weeks, I'm always a big preacher of incorporating game theory the more and more you go down the board. But this week, I think it's even more so the case than what we've talked about recently. So from the line of construction standpoint, I think that's the main takeaway that you have there is that your 6K chalk, there's a few guys down there that are getting some steam, are especially egregious. And I'd say the 7K chalk, especially like the bottom end of the 7K chalk, is especially egregious at this sort of course. And another way to get off of some of that chalk in the 7K range is to note that event history is really important around here. This is one of the stickier courses when it comes to course history. Also one of the courses where experience really pays off. So if there's somebody in that 7K range that's maybe a little bit more inexperienced or perhaps has poor course history and the starts that he has around Riviera, then maybe those could be players that jump ship on. Whereas, if you're going to use a piece of 7K chalk, which I'm not thrilled about, I think there's like one piece of quote unquote chalk that I'm playing this week in the 7K range. And it's one of the guys that we talked up on Monday. So that's part of the reason for it, right? Is I loved him on a Monday, so I'll stick behind it. But all of the other pieces down there, a lot of them I'm jumping ship on because they don't have that course history and that track record behind them. So a lot of the pivots I'm making, the guys that are lower owned around them that I'd rather use are players like a Max Homa that maybe aren't playing as well as some of those other guys, but that do have the track record around Riviera. And we know he's an elite tier player. We know he's capable of spiking. You've seen it, once or twice over the last 6 months. Those are the kind of ownership decisions that I'm personally making this week. So again, if you want to download the sheet, make sure to check out the link in the description of the video to do so. Golf DFS tiers, how you guys download this. I don't only just do this for main slate, but also for showdown and rounds 2 through 4. I've got spreadsheets on there with my entire player pool, all my projections catered for every single round. Any sort of a weather edge, course edge, you name it, is of course incorporated into these spreadsheets. Make sure to check that out if you haven't already. But we're going to go through any deep dives, any questions that you guys have in the chat. This will probably be the longest section of this live stream, but making sure that you have all those last second questions answered. So anyone that we haven't already gone through, now is the time for that. Afterwards, we are going to go through the prop and the betting side. So if you guys are here for Prize Picks, Underdog, some stuff on the sports books too, like matchups and 3-balls, we're going to cover that afterwards. But until we get through all these comments, let's go ahead and see what you guys are curious about. So let me get a sip of this, wet the tongue a little bit, and keep this thing going. Let's see. So you said not much of an edge, but an edge anyways. You're looking at some of the early guys because of the wins. The only counter to that would be that they have to play through some rain. And, playing through rain isn't something you can overlook, especially if it ends up being a heavy rain. So I think it can go either way. If you want to make it your narrative that you want to avoid the wins, I think could potentially be an edge there, but I could see it going the other direction as well. You're looking at Harry English and Bud Cauley. Any strong thoughts on either of those two players? So Harry English played well towards the end of last week. So if you're a believer in momentum, that could be a thing. And Cauley too, he had one of his better weeks last week, at least early on, compared to what he's done in the rest of 2026. Really got the iron play going. Putter is still kind of let him down. That's been his big Achilles heel in 2026. Let's look at English too. English and shots gained metrics are going to be a lot better, a lot more consistent, gaining in 3 of the 4 categories. I don't have strong thoughts about either player, to be frank with you. Like, the metrics look decent. They're playing all right heading in, but that's about all I think about them. I don't have them on the top of my radar. They also aren't players that I hate for this week either. So, I'd be crazy to tell you I have that many thoughts about them because I don't. Let's see. How have the Cats been lately? They've been good, Tommy. They still drive me nuts sometimes at night, but that's just what Cats do. What are my thoughts on Penge? I bet him for a top 20 this week, so I have pretty good thoughts about Micro Penge. It mostly has to do with his long-term talent. He was the best player coming from the DP World Tour that got their card for 2026, and he's a power player. So if this is going to be a week where power is more rewarded because of that wet nature of the course, then I'm going to be a buyer on him for sure. Is driving distance that big of a factor when the front 9 layout kind of limits the driver use? Yeah, it is a big factor. You've seen, first off, correlation before this year, the driving distance, especially the last 3 years at Riviera where it's played easier. And then you add on top of it, that's going to be a wet, long golf course. Absolutely. And there are going to be a few holes where you can't hit driver, at least if you can't shape it properly. But there are enough holes where you can hit driver where it is going to matter. So, yeah, I know some people may say otherwise, trying to galaxy brain it and whatnot. But in general, man, soft golf course means power means more. It's not even just with the driver. It's all the other clubs too. Having more power means that you're able to generate more birdie looks, more spin into the greens. And I think that's really what's going to matter this week. It's not going to be as hard of a Riviera. It's going to be much more scoreable. What's going on, Mike? Can I deep dive Noren and Ryan Fox of Gotcha? So Noren is a well-rounded guy. He plays harder. He plays the harder golf course as well. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case this week, but he is gaining across all 4 stat categories. We really want well-rounded players at this track. That's something I'd say about this course, is especially like under normal conditions, guys like Xander, guys like Cantlay that are able to gain across all 4 categories. Even a Homa, when he's playing well, he does that same thing. It's not really a surprise that you've seen those guys find consistency here. Just that I don't think the around the green and the putting is going to mean as much this time around. So I think he's like maybe a 6 out of 10 still have to give him credit for the shots gained. But then Ryan Fox, I was more so deep diving in, is actually on my short list this week. I plan on using him in quite a few DFS lineups. He's gaining off the tee, gaining on approach. Is he only losing with the around the green play over the last 12? And he has the power that I think he can get a slight advantage because of that soft golf course. So yeah, give me some Ryan Fox. And another thing to note is that Kikuyu grass, something that's prominent in Australia and New Zealand, where he's from. So keep an eye out for Mr. Ryan Fox. I think he's a decent course fit here. What's going on, Illini fan? Excited to get these back at Riviera. Yeah, it's been 2 years. It's been 2 years too long. Can I deep dive Knapp and Jason Day? For sure. So Knapp, I'll give you a quick one. I love him. He's one of my core plays. If you want to see the full breakdown on that, you can check out my Monday breakdown, just like last week, right? Some of these guys I do 5 to 6 minute breakdowns on, so I'm going to default you to that one. But in general, he's a 9 out of 10 for me this week. And then Jason Day, I'll give you some thoughts on here because we didn't talk about that on Monday. But Jason Day has good course history. He's got a couple top 10s at this golf course over the last 5 seasons. The issue is with Day is that the off the tee fit's not ideal. And it wasn't enough for me to jump ship. I'm still using him in some lineups this week, but the off the tee fit could be better. He's lost some distance. He's lost some club head speed, which I really noticed at the Amex. Didn't cost him that week. In fact, he finished in second. He was somebody that I was a big investor on at that Amex golf tournament. But at these tracks, especially this one that's 7,400 yards and is now going to be playing closer to 76, probably 7,700 yards, with the fact that there's no rollouts, it could be problematic, especially when he's playing against the world's best players. If this was a slapdick field, then Jason Day could probably still win here. I don't know if he can against the world's best players when, the off the tee could be a problem for him. If he's missing fairways, it could be a big issue for him. Like missing fairways at a course that's wet with that rough that's already sticky could be a +5 round. That's the problem. What's going on, Mr. Who's? Welcome on in. What's this guy saying? What's going on, Greg? He said, use a Reds. I don't even know what that means. It says some cold morning temps as well. Yeah, notice that. Looks like that's the case for Friday too and Saturday. Sunday looks like it's going to be the warmest out of all 4 days. Thoughts on Sam Burns? Well, it kind of feels like chasing after he had that really good weekend last weekend. I will say that the shots gained metrics are very much so on brand for him, mostly carrying himself with the putter over the last 24 rounds. Yeah. He's not my favorite play. And the only reason I'll say that is that he had the spike week. Now everyone wants to play him. What happened last time out was a better course fit for him than I think what we have here. So I'm going to be somebody that's taking a shot against him this week. I just feel like it's people chasing, in my opinion. Maybe it works out. Form is a thing on golf, but I don't think it's as drastic as some people think. Deep dive on Adam Scott. So he's got good course history. I guess that's the starting point I'm going to give you on an Adam Scott, because he hasn't played that much on tour recently to look at the results. But a couple of years ago, remember that this last year wasn't at Riviera. So we want to look at these last 4 years for that sample. On the top 20, he's got the top 4. Before that, he's somebody that's had top 5s and I believe has won at this golf course before. Maybe I'm incorrect on that, but if my memory serves me correctly, he's gone into the winner's circle at Riviera before. He's also played well at comp courses, like especially some of the harder greens on tour, like the Masters, for example. He's had a lot of success there as well. That's what you like about Adam Scott. What you don't like is that the shots gained metrics are from like half a year ago. So he is gaining ball striking, the 2 most important stat categories, but anything recent has been on the DP World Tour. So you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt. The DP World Tour is an easier tour to gain shots gained on. So although these metrics are favorable, you can see that's where that comes from. It's like, how much do you trust it, right? Can we deep dive Bridgman and Hisatuni on a scale from 1 to 10? I gotcha. So both are guys that have played well recently that aren't good course fits. So from the shots gained perspective, both are going to be 7 out of 10. So it's really easy to kind of lump these two together, but their course fits are 3 out of 10. So for me, they end up grading out pretty average because of that. And the reason I have them as below average course fits is that they're not known for their short game and they're short off the tee. This is a week where I think that driving distance is more of a priority than most. It's already a big reward at most tracks, but this week I think it's going to be on steroids because of the fact that you're not going to have any rollout. Then you add on top of that like we're going to see it at some point. Maybe Bridgman's getting better with the short game. I think that's why he's been more consistent lately. Rio, I don't think is a slouch with his short game, but I just think there's better courses for him. Like, for example, Rio was one of our top plays last week because Pebble Beach was sub 7,000 yards. And Jacob Bridgman, I believe somebody asked about him, and I said, yeah, he's got upside at these shorter tracks. I wish I would have invested into him more because I would have had a much better week for DFS if I had done so. But like at Pebble Beach, those kind of guys going off make sense because it fits their skill set. They don't have to bomb it out there. They don't have to compete with your Rorys, even like your Patrick Rogers or your Tony Finau's of the world that are going to beat you up off the tee. They are going to have to compete with that this week. So I'm going to give them a 5 out of 10 in either case, and two really, really similar players there. How would I change my pool for single entry? Well, if you've only got one lineup, I'd only have 6 guys in my player pool. So if you're talking strategy based, that's where I think we can have a conversation about it. Is you want to be, I would say, a little bit more aggressive with your salary. Sorry, not with your salary, with your ownership from that perspective. Because when you're playing against 100 people, it's really easy to think like, oh, I'm not going to duplicate myself against 100 other people, so I'll just play all the chalk. While you might not duplicate yourself with other lineups, you are still going to have to deal with that ownership component and not the lack of leverage and actually moving up those leaderboards. So what I usually say is like, get a little bit more leverage into your lineups in the 8K range or maybe even the 9K range in your single entries, because what happens, we're going to do the whole lecture here, but we'll do the Sparkle Notes version. What happens in single entries is people get scared, okay? They don't want to play the leverage plays in single entries. So that happens in the 6 and 7K range too. Like the guys that are like 0.5 to 1% owned don't get played in the bottom end ranges. But the guys, for example, like we can see here on the screen, like let's say Ludwig Gobert, I think would be a great example of this because some people, including myself, thought maybe he was injured a couple weeks back. In single entries, no one's going to use him, and he might be like 5% owned in some single entries. I like getting aggressive with the 8, 9K range, and it doesn't even have to be a Luddy. Maybe it could be in the 9K range where you go, you know what? I'm going to get quote unquote different with a Victor or a Ben Griffin. That's being a little bit overlooked compared to the guys around him. By the way, I love Victor this week, so I think Victor would be my favorite to do that within the 9K range. But I like getting a little bit more aggressive about my ownership leverage in the 8, 9K range because you have more room to squeeze out of them. The large field GPPs, people are still going to play these guys because they like to spread out the ownership. They go for the high upside plays when you have 150 lineups to work with. But when you only have one lineup to work with, some people don't have the stones to do that, right? They don't have the, the nut sack down there to go, I'll play somebody that's single digit owned in a single entry. And there's a lot of utility in being able to do that. So that's what I would say, man, is like, I like getting more aggressive in those formats because everyone else isn't going to be willing to do so. He said, you're getting into some daily drafts, and he got into a $25 draft, and you got Scheffler, Knapp, Rio, Hovland, Stevens, and Penge. Well, I like all 6 of those guys, so I think you're doing something right there. He said, is Minwoo a good course fit? So he's got some aspects to his game that I think play well here. He's a good around the green player. He's long off the tee, which I think is good for this specific year with how soft the golf course is going to be. The only bad part about his course fit's the approach play. He's got to be more consistent there. This is a second shot golf course, and because he only hit like 10.5 greens of regulation per round, players that can hit 13 to 15 greens per round this week are going to gain 5 to 10 strokes to the field. The ones that are gaining, hitting 15 to 16 greens per round are going to be gaining a crap ton from that perspective. He's not really that kind of guy. He did have a good iron week last week, but that is a bit sporadic for him. It's not something he does that often on tour. So we'll have to see if he can continue that. If he can, he's got the off the tee fit and the around the green fit for this golf course, which not everyone else does. Deep dive Marco Penge, I'm also going to have you take a look at the live stream, the video actually that we did on Monday. I gave a lot of thoughts there, but I like the off the tee fit and the around the green play. So I'll give him a 9 out of 10, which for somebody down low, I obviously love that. Thoughts on Wyndham Clark? So he plays well in Cali. He hits the ball long off the tee, which I happen to like this week. And he's been playing better recently than what he did in 2025. But if our barometer for him is 2025, then, you can tell how lost we are because he absolutely sucked last year. Like there's, at least for the standards of this field, not that many players that played worse than Wyndham Clark last year. So it's good to see the positive momentum, but you're getting a very inconsistent Wyndham Clark, somebody that has shown up in contention a couple of times over the last 6 months, but has also completely fallen on his face and missed cuts over that sample size as well. So I'd say for DFS purposes, he's a bigger GPP play or a better for the larger 150 max kind of contest. And you wouldn't want to use them in like single entries of cash. That'd probably be getting a little bit too cute. And that's also to get back to the question that the guy had about single entry before. That's why I like getting different in the 8 and 9K range, because when you do it there, you're getting quality players. You're not getting like, I hate to call Wyndham Clark a slapdick as a major champion, but he's kind of been playing like a slapdick the last year or so. Any thoughts on first round leader? Could Scotty take it? And also the deep dive on Novak. So let's start with the first round leader thoughts. Don't really have that many thoughts on it, especially with the weather looking so chaotic. I could see either side of the draw really getting the advantage. So I'm personally going to be punting round one showdown and the first round leader market, not really giving my thoughts because I just think it's going to be too unpredictable to really give you too much on that. Could Scotty take it though? For sure. You're talking about world number one. He was an unbelievable round one scorer. He led the tour, at least I think. Actually, I have to double check that. Somebody said it on PGA Tour Live, so I'm assuming that they're not lying to us. He said he led the tour in scoring for all 4 rounds. I know for sure, though, that he was by far the best in round one last year. So, yeah, could he get that done? Yes, but the weather is such a big wild card that, yeah, I'm not going to have any first-round leader bets in there. I don't think it's worth doing it when it could go sideways. Deep dive, Homa and Mav for shots gained California. They've got that into the positive. But if you're just asking about a regular deep dive on both, Homa's been playing well, at least for his standards. Also, like a Wyndham Clark, really struggled last year, but is gaining over the last 24 rounds across all 4 categories. That's extremely positive. So I'll give him a 7 out of 10 over that sample. Let's look at the last 12 too. I'm assuming pretty similar stuff. If he's not into all 4 into the positive, it's probably 3 out of the 4, and that's exactly what it is. So yeah, no, not that many complaints there, especially because he's got a good course history. And then who? Mav? Yeah, I mean, also good in Cali. So I guess that was the common denominator between those two, like you were saying. Well, shots gained also look similar. He's gaining across all 4 categories. We know Mav's had some spike performances over the last month on tour. Homa really hasn't, right? Homa's kind of just been hanging around. So I'd have to give Mav like a 9 out of 10 as opposed to a Homa that we had closer to a 7. But both make sense. Mav's also more expensive, so you're paying for that higher ranking. But yeah, I'm using both this week, so I like both quite a bit. It's a great example of why you're the best, Luke. Didn't know that about the rain. I appreciate you, Ken, for the kind words. But yeah, that's why we're here, right? To give you that last second info. He said the par 3 fourth should be interesting. Yeah, so if you don't know, they made that 270 yards. Now, they're probably not going to tip it out all 4 days. They probably won't tip it out day 1 either. But whenever they do, that'll be an absolute popcorn box score watching for sure. Luke, what are my thoughts on Nico? He said he can never get that guy right. So I mentioned last week that it was a good course fit because the course was short. You don't play Nico. Here's my rule of thumb, and this will probably help you, Ben. You don't play him at courses where you can lose a lot off the tee. That includes water, that includes long rough, and that includes this week where you have a long, hard golf course where he's super short off the tee and he's super inaccurate. So he has like both problems, right? Some people will be short and that's why they lose strokes off the tee. Some people will hit the ball into hazards too much. And that's like a Nick Dunlap, for example. And that's how they lose strokes off the tee. He does it both ways. So that's why my rule of thumb is to not play him at off the tee heavy golf courses, because it just takes away the opportunity for that to happen from him. Because Pebble Beach was sub 7,000 yards, it's one of the few weeks where we could say that about him. Now, could he still hit it into the cliffs and whatnot? Yeah, he did that a couple of times last week, but it's going to be a little bit less problematic than this course, where literally every tee shot he's hitting could be an instant bogey if he hits it into the long stuff. So yeah, not my favorite play this weekend. Yeah, maybe that rule of thumb will help you out there because I think it has to do with his driver. How about I rate out Thigala versus Finau? So I like both to some extent this week, and kind of for different reasons. And I'd say Thigala I like a little bit more than Finau because he's got both things going on. Both have good course history. Finau's played well here over the years. Ball striker, you kind of expect that. A lot of top 10s, a lot of top 20s for him. It is a limited field, but even then, top 20s in a strong field like this matter. And then you've got Thigala, who had the one top 5 finish here a couple years ago, and then has played better in 2026. I say Thigala is a little bit better because he's also got that recent form. Thigala has been a little bit more hit or miss, but Finau's also been a lot more, I shouldn't say a lot more consistent. That's not the word for it. He's been better recently than what you had in 2025. 2025, especially towards the end of last year, he could not make a cut for his life. I mean, it was really, really bad. It was like a big red flag. Like I was worried about his career there for a little bit. I'm not as worried about Thagala at this point. So that's why maybe I slightly prefer him, but both kind of make sense. What are my thoughts on Fowler, and what do I think he is in relation to the floor and ceiling? I'm not really sure what you mean with that second part, but I will give you some thoughts on Fowler in general, and then maybe you can clarify what you mean by the second part of that question. But Fowler in general, I really like. I mean, I'm on record as saying that I think that Fowler's been underrated with how he's played over the last year. He's had a lot of top 25s, a lot of consistency, and that's despite not even having spike putting weeks, which are normally what carries his game. However, this isn't a great course fit for him. I've been trying to target him at courses that aren't as off the tee heavy because he's been hitting a lot of fairways, but he has not been driving it very far. If he can have a good week with the accuracy, still hit the driver a lot, and hit maybe 65, 70% of his fairways, I think he's live, but he's got a much narrower range of outcomes, or I should say avenue towards the positive range of outcomes, because his driver's got to be perfect. So I just think there's better tracks for him. What's going on, Mr. R. Klein? You were about 7 minutes late, but you're caught up now. Is Higo in play from the lefty South African narrative? Yeah, I haven't heard that lefty South African narrative. I guess the lefty is Bubba Watson, huh? And then somebody else that's a lefty ended up playing well here. I guess Phil, right? He hasn't had an elite track record, I don't think, but he's been pretty good. And then the South African one, who's that? Who's the South African that used to win here a lot? It's not Louis. It's not Charles, right? I guess I could see it if you're looking at narrative streets, but I'm not a big narrative guy. So I'm personally not a big Higo guy this week. I'm just wondering who the South African narrative's from. I get the lefty stuff, but not sure about the second one. Hey, Luke, what are my thoughts on Ryan Fox and Max Grazeman? Gave some Fox thoughts before. I'd probably give him a 6.5, a 7 out of 10 this week, which for a 6K range guy is much better than most. So I'm using him in some lineups. Grazeman, though, haven't given that much thought to. I'm going to give him a 3.5 out of 10. He is long off the tee, but that's probably where the positives stop. Let's look at the shots gained metrics. Maybe I'm giving him too much crap there and it's unwarranted. Yeah, so this is why. I'm going to stand by it. He's like a 3.5 out of 10 because he hits the ball long, but he's losing across all four categories. So that's he's not impossible to turn this around, but in a strong field like this, top 70-some players on the PGA Tour, I'd just rather use somebody with a pulse than him. How is the course fit for Akshay? I'd say it's like a 6 out of 10 course fit. I don't think it's a great one for him, but it's an okay enough course fit. I honestly don't think there's any courses that are like 9 out of 10 course fits for Akshay because he gains across all four stat categories. So maybe even I'd give him a 7 out of 10 because I said before we wanted well-rounded players, and he's a relatively well-rounded player himself. But yeah, like a 7 out of 10. But I don't think there's any courses that you could say it's like a 9 or a 10. Thoughts on Lucas Glover as a cheap fit-in? He's one of the first times that we've seen him since the injury and coming back. So I was a little bit worried about that the last time out. What'd he do? I knew it was a no-cut event, so it's not like he could have missed the cut. And then he finished T64. Yeah, I'm going to be waiting and seeing, man. Anytime you have somebody coming off from such a big, long layoff, I just don't think it's worthy to go out there and like force it in. What's going on, Damon? He said Fitzpatrick's pretty popular. Thoughts on him? I get why. It's because of the ball striking stats. He's been hitting the ball better than he really has his entire career. And it's about 2 strokes into the positive between his off the tee and on approach. So I'll give him a 9 out of 10. I could see him playing well this week. Is it some Max McGreevy deep dive? He said the BTN stats have some nice green. Yeah, I was noticing that earlier, and that's because he's a striper. The shots gained perspective is probably an 8 out of 10, but let's confirm that. Let's give him a 7 out of 10 just because it's an elite tier field, but he's gaining off the tee, gaining on approach like we would have thought. However, these shots gained metrics are coming from weaker fields. He played the fall swing. The last 24 rounds for him are mostly from that fall swing from in the last 6 months. These other guys around him didn't play all those fall swing events. So if they're gaining, for example, like I guess Hoey also played the fall swing. So maybe he's not the best example of it. But let's find like a JT Poston, for example, that wasn't as prominent during the fall. Him gaining ball striking is a little bit more impressive than some of the other players that were playing during that part of the year. And the reason for is that's easier to gain strokes when you're playing against weaker fields. And you can do the whole deep dive on that, research it properly if you guys don't know how the shots gained works. But The field strength matters. That's why, for example, like when we see DP World Tour guys coming over and they can be lighting it up on approach and with their iron play, we just have to take it with a grain of salt. It's still good to see that. It's just that it's not going to be as impressive as doing it like a signature event like this week. Hey, Luke, you said you're late, but thoughts on McIntyre? I got you. Hey, better to have you late than never, so no worries on that. If I could spell this right, they could find his shots gained, which are a bit sketchy, at least for somebody that's in the 8K range. He's a bit inconsistent over that sample size. Losing on approach is a red flag, especially because it's the most important stat category that we have. He's at least into the positive in the other 3 categories, but he could definitely be better off with tee. He's normally a lot better, at least historically there. Go to the last 12 rounds. It's the same story. In fact, he's a little bit worse into the negative on approach, a little bit better with the off the tee play. I mean, we know the problem. He just has to clean up that second shot. It's just that this is a golf course where if you don't have that second shot, you can get exposed at times. It's a hard ball striking test. That's why shots gained approach is number 1 in my modeling for this week. So, I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10 because the saving grace is that McIntyre is an extremely talented guy, but I just wish that he was trending a little bit better. He said the funny thing about the rain is that if it keeps up, it won't come down. Oh boy, the trippy comments in chat. You're always good for at least one of those. Live stream, Ross. I appreciate you. And yeah, what goes up must come down. That's what they say, huh? Matsuyama or Tommy for the win. If I had to pick one of those two, I mean, I didn't bet either one, but I'd probably go Matsuyama just because he's on that heater right now. Fleetwood still playing some solid golf himself, though. He said weather's going to be bad for the first round. I agree with that. We're going to talk about that extensively with props here in just a few moments. You're going Friday. First off, I'm jealous. I'll be at the event next week and the one after that. So I'll have some boots on the ground info for you guys. But hey, I guess you'll have us for this time out. Aussie, let us know what you see out there. What's going on? He said scoring was much better than expected Sunday because of lift clean in place. Will that happen Thursday? It could. We're actually going to talk about props and lift clean in place being a part of that. But we're going to have to see the lift clean in place first before we incorporate that. So I'll give you some strategy notes on that when we get to it. Course fit for Goddard. He said bombs it, but how are the middle and long irons? So the iron play is great across the board. He was a top 15 green regulation percentage guy last year, and it had a lot to do with his long iron play. So course fit, I really like, except for the POA putting. And we're not going to have enough time to do this here because this is just like a last minute stream, right? It's not a full, player deep dive or something like that. Like where I can bring up round by round and event by event stuff. We can go through it that way. Just take my word on it, though. You can see over the last 12 rounds, he's losing like a half stroke putting per round. Even when he won, which was on a type of POA at Waste Management, a slightly different strain than the pure POA that we're getting this week, but similar characteristics from that type of POA to this type of POA. He lost strokes putting that week, but he's lost strokes putting in all the different weeks that you're playing on this grass. That's the only part of the course fit that I don't like. Now, was that enough for me to jump ship on Chris? No, I'm still using him this week. But I do wish that the putting stats were a little bit better. And, I know that he's playing well now. People are kind of on him. He's in the 8K range, still being used in DFS. But when we get this guy on Bermuda grass, which, by the way, he gains on for his career, I'm betting him every single week during the fall swing. I'm not kidding. I guess it depends on the number we're getting. So I can't say I'm just indiscriminately going to be betting him. But if you give me anything that I think is within reason, or especially a good number on Chris Goddard, that he's going to be my first click as soon as we get him off of POA. So I just wanted to put that on record because I think it's going to be something that we want to track. Because if he goes from, hitting the ball really well, losing putting and still being in contention to going to that and then gaining putting when he gets onto Bermuda grass, it could be like runaway wins for him at some of these different spots, especially like maybe if he plays a Valspar and he's able to get a field that's not as strong as like, let's say an API or players. I'm going to be investing there. I can promise you that. So I like that for sure. Phil Weir. Okay. He said Charles won there. Okay. That makes more sense. I was wondering who it was because I knew it had to be some of the older men that got that job done. He said, Luke, can you give me my thoughts on his DFS lineup? So only running, or saying on your DFS lineup, I guess, right? I was wondering what you meant there, but I get what you're saying. He said, you're only running 2 lineups. You've got, a captain lineup. Okay. So you're going with that format. You got Fleetwood, Morikawa, Fitzday, Cootie, and Bridgman. I would say that it looks a little chalky. Like, I'm not sure what website that's on because you have the captain in there. Maybe a little chalky, but yeah, you'll have to let me know what website that's on, man. In general, though, I like the plays that you're on. Like, for example, I think specifically Jason Day Cootie are probably my favorite of the bunch, but you'll have to let me know the format and I can give you some slightly better information on that. Not 100% certain on this, but the grass found in South Africa is Kikuyu. It's also found in parts of Australia and in New Zealand. And he said South Africa and Australia, I guess, are known for it. Yeah, so that's something that I have kept in the back of my mind. But like, same thing with like the putting, right? Like putting on POA, putting on Bermuda grass is a factor that we look at. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data for the stuff on Kikuyu grass, or else, yeah, I would have been deep diving that this week, man. And I think it's this week and then the Farmers are the only two golf courses that have some type of Kikuyu on it. And the Kikuyu this week is not the exact same as the Kikuyu that they have at Torrey Pines. So it's, yeah, that's why we don't have the stats on it. I wish we did, because that would be one for the true sweaty tryhards. Jerry says, question on Michael Kim. I don't really have that many thoughts on him this week. Main reason why is he's not the longest player off the tee. So, that's a narrative that I'm personally weighing pretty heavily this week. And he's actually losing about 0.8 strokes per round off the tee. He's been good elsewhere. He's gaining on approach. He's gaining with the putter. He's a bit of a, putting first player. So that's not necessarily off brand. But over the last 12 rounds, so this is from 2026 for the most part, losing off the tee and losing on approach. So I'd say like in a large 150 max contest, he could be a flyer play, but that's where I would limit it to. I wouldn't be investing into him in like your single entries, your high dollar stuff. There's probably better options that you can get to. Any love for Hovland or some Team Hoagie? Yeah, I'm on some Hovland this week. I like Hovland's course fit, long off the tee. He's also played well at Riviera's, called it his favorite golf course in the world. Also really hit the ball well and approached last time out. So I like that quite a bit. Hoagie, the off the tee fit's not there. He's really good on approach. He's getting back to that, which is good to see for his chances in the Florida swing. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait till he gets to Florida, some of the more positional golf courses where he doesn't have to worry about the driver as much. And that's personally where I think he's better to deploy. How am I feeling about Adam Scott? I wish that he's played more in America recently so that we knew how he was hitting the ball. The course fit, though, is extremely positive. So he's a hard one for me. I'd have to put him at like a 5 out of 10 average just because we have two conflicting factors there. But there's some good and there's some bad with an Adam Scott recently. He said, you got some overs for birdies on Fleetwood and McIlroy. You think it'll hit? I hope it does for you, just for your sake. Do I think it'll hit, though? The props are going to be a tough one, Jose. If the rain's not that bad in the morning, then I could see both of those having a day, especially with potentially a lift clean in place in there. But if there's no lift clean in place and they're playing through a heavy rain, you might be absolutely fucked. So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves with the props quite yet, but I think that the props round one are absolutely suck. Like, it's probably the worst slate that we've seen for quite some time. So I'm going to expand on that later, but who knows, man? I think you're okay taking those two leans. They're not ones that I've bet myself, but however it shakes out, I hope it goes well for you, man. Knapp is going out early tomorrow, but what do I think about him for a first-round leader bets? So I touched on this earlier, but the first-round leader could go either way. You could say that playing earlier when the winds aren't as much of a factor might be a good thing, but then you also have to play through the rain that's coming down. Or you could say that I want to play after the rain has stopped, but then you're also playing during the wind. So I personally don't think that it's obvious which side's going to play easier. So if you're just talking about the tee time effect on that, I don't have thoughts. I think that it's very chaotic. It's really hard to tell what's going to happen. And just for the first-round leader strategy, if I was going to, and I'm not betting first-round leaders, just again, the asterisk on that, I always like to be transparent about it. I'm not betting first-round leaders. If I was, I probably wouldn't look at tee times. It'd be about high upside guys that consistently, or at least, you're not going to consistently do this, but guys that are capable of gaining 4 to 5 strokes to the field, because that's what you need to be a first-round leader. So I would want to optimize on that, and just giving you some kind of, feedback on Jake now. He's somebody that tends to do that. He did it at the Mexico Open when he played well and ended up winning, I believe was first-round leader. He's done it at least once over the last 6 months. I forget exactly which event, but he was up there after the first day. I think that he's an okay option for it, but the weather is going to be a tough one on that, man. I'm not sure which side's getting the better of it tomorrow. Thoughts on Goddard up for the under on 70 and the Bhatia under at 70.5? Well, I played both of those props myself, so I like both of them quite a bit. If you can get 3-1 on Dabble, I'd say I like it even more because the payout's better, but I'll give you some more thoughts when we get to props. So where did you find Fleetwood at 3.5 birdies? It was probably with a multiplier. So yeah, he probably just forgot to tell you about that. He said, did I miss a deep dive on Finau? So I gave some thoughts on Finau, but I'm not sure we did quite a full deep dive on him whenever he was brought up. But he's been putting it really well, which is a good sign, but it screams unsustainability because he's not a really good putter historically. He's at least been gaining with the iron play as well. What we really want to see with Tony Finau to know that he's like playing well and he's in a good groove is him gaining off the tee, gaining on approach. I guess seeing the putter into the positive would also be a good sign, but the two most important categories, he's only got one of the two going right now. So that's why I'd have to limit him to like a 6 out of 10. But he's also got really good course history around Riviera. So, maybe that can spur him on to a good week. I'm definitely going to be rooting for him as one of the best players out there. Yeah, we talked the weather earlier. If you go back to the first 5 minutes, you can get a deep dive on that. He said Griffin is going to break. I hope not. But, I mean, he could be out of energy. Like, that's a fair criticism to make of Ben Griffin, right? Is that, he had his run in 2025. He played almost every single week. He was riding that high for a very long time. And now he's just kind of been like average to start 2026. We'll see. I don't have a take on that either way. But I think it is probably going to go one of the two directions, right? He's probably either going to go into a slump or he's going to get right back after it. We'll have to see. What's going on, Mr. Mike? He said, sorry if you missed this. You're just jumping in, but how are we feeling about Cantlay? You're thinking about using him in one and done? Well, the course history is going to be hard to beat. So I'd say if you're looking at him from the one and done perspective, like that's a good data point in your favor. Ignore the T5 last year. That was not at Riviera, but he had the 4th, the 3rd, T33, and then another 15th in back. I believe that was in 2021 when he did that. The thing is with Cantlay, I have such a hard time getting him right. So I'm probably not even the best person to ask and give you some feedback on Patrick Cantlay. But it always feels like Cantlay is playing good, not great. And the shots gained would back that up. Over the last 12 rounds, he's gaining 0.89 shots gained per round over that sample size. And let's see, over the last 24 rounds, I even want to see what that looks like. He's gaining 0.7 shots per round over the last 24 round sample size. I mean, that's better than average, but this is an elite tier field, and I'm not sure if that's enough. So, yeah, I guess my take is the course history is great. He's shown it at Riviera before. But the way that he's playing right now just throws me off, man. Like, I'm not sure whether to think that he's playing well or terribly because, we just have higher expectations for him at this point. He said, Patreon membership paid for itself week 1. I love to hear that, Kathleen. It's a run it back and try and add on top of that this week, though. By the way, guys, check out the Patreon if you haven't already. I mean, Kathleen said it herself. Pays off itself in 1 week in most cases. He said, Underdog's got him at 3.5. There you go. Any edge on props? I'm going to give you some more information on that, but I honestly don't think so. I think round 1's a wash from the prop perspective. Maybe a few pieces of value that you can find on specific categories. But with the weather, I don't think that's as big an edge as we've seen so far this year. Can we go back to Morikawa? I think a lot of people's initial reaction is no to that, right? Because he's somebody that kind of won out of nowhere, had not been in contention for quite some time, but he wasn't playing poorly before the win. He was still playing okay golf. So it wasn't completely inconceivable that he was going to put it all together and get into the winner's circle. And the reason why I'd say that, like, you're not crazy for wanting to go back to them is look at the ownership. I've got him at about 13%, which is significantly lower owned than a Hideki and a Patrick Cantlay. So, he's not my cup of tea this week, but you could go back to him. That's within the realm of possibility for sure. Are you crazy to pair Rory and Fleetwood together or Rory and then a 9K guy? Do I think that'll be common? Yeah, it'll be relatively common because he's 20%. Most of those 9K guys are, 10 to 15% as well. But I don't think that combination is going to be more or less popular than any of the other ones. Like, Rory himself as a starting point is, I think, totally fine to go with. I've got Scotty at that similar mark. Now, I guess if you're comparing Scotty plus a 9K guy compared to like Rory plus a 9K guy, it is going to be a lot different because you can't play Scotty plus a 9K guy, right? It's just not possible. So that would have a difference. But if you're comparing the Rory plus a 9K guy to like, let's say starting at Fleetwood below him and then using another 9K option instead, that's not going to have a big difference. So good question, but it shouldn't be that big in your process, I'd say. Said, appreciate everything. Thank you for breaking down everything. I appreciate the kind words. Best of luck this week. He said, lineup construction. Am I giving up too much win equity if the lineup starts with Rory and skips the 9K range? I don't think so. At least if you're taking Rory as your guy to win, I wouldn't say that that's the case. I mean, if you were skipping the entire 9K range in general and you didn't have a Rory or Scotty in your lineup, I would say that you were. But yeah, if you get the win out of him, you definitely aren't. That some of the 8K guys, you really like them and you feel like it'd be different to fade the 9K range. Yeah, you could do that. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. He said, appreciate the dive on Cantlay, man. He said, Hideki's looking better for one and done, or at least you're asking. He said, you feel the exact same way about Cantlay, the most flatline golfer of all time. So I actually don't like Hideki as much this week. I would say if you're choosing between Hideki and Cantlay, I'd rather you take Cantlay out of those two players. Hideki's problem's been the driver, and this is a driver-heavy golf course. This is a course where off the tee play has been correlated to success over the last 5 years. It's been the number 2 key stat behind shots gained approach. And, if he's not going to fix it off the tee play, he kind of did at Pebble, but it wasn't completely back. I'd prefer somebody that has it off the tee at a better place. So, yeah, it's the only pushback on him, man, is that's been the Achilles heel. Thoughts on Lowry? Plays well at harder courses. He does play well when the winds kick up, but that's really only going to be the case for the first round. If you take a look at the shots gained metrics, he looks like he's an absolute world killer. But you do have to also keep in mind that some of these shots gained metrics are coming from the DP World Tour. So that's where this 1.4 shots gained on approach is coming from. I'll give him a 6.5 out of 10, though. Still got to give him props for that, but I do kind of nerf it because of where it comes from. Can I scroll up just a bit more when showing players? My box tends to block who I'm talking about. No big deal if I can't. I love the stream. I can, Philip. But then also would make the stuff smaller, right? So for example, this is what it would look like, which it does not block the names, but then the boxes are smaller, right? There's gives and taking for doing either sort of format. And because we're talking about the players, right, and we're mentioning them beforehand, I think people prefer it this way so that they can actually see the numbers. But feel free to let me know in the live chat if you'd prefer it the other way. I'm just trying to do what's best for the live chat, especially some of the, maybe people that don't have the best eyesight that are watching the live stream and that need the numbers blown up a little bit more. But yeah, just let me know, chat guys, if you prefer it one way versus the other. Let's talk through some prop stuff now. Now that we've gone through DFS, I'm pretty comfortable about what we've gone through there. Let's talk through props, which, I've already kind of told you, I'll shoot it to you straight. I don't think it's a good slate for props. The reason why is that course conditions look extremely volatile. There could be delays with over an inch of rain in just a 3 or 4 hour period. They've already gone an inch of rain this week. So it's not just it's the rain tomorrow. That's the problem. There's a chance that they don't start till the afternoon, and then the afternoon guys don't go off until Friday. So this is why I'm going extremely light for my props in round number 1. And, I'd say if you're going to do anything, props on the sports books are still safe to go with because everyone has to play in the same conditions if you're playing them in a 3-ball or a head-to-head matchup. So that's where I'm going a little bit heavier unit-wise. But here's my take on course conditions. I think, if anything, that it might play a little bit easier than what we think. I would say the scoring averages from 2024 are, in general, going to be pretty accurate for round number 1. I don't think it's going to get harder. I do think the winds are going to kick up in the afternoon, but you've also got to keep in mind that it's going to be on an unbelievably soft golf course, which, of course, helps scoring. It helps with your second shot, helps you hitting fairways, too. And because they're expecting rain during play. They're supposed to tee off right before this big storm comes through. At least to me, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I can't see them not playing without lift, clean, and place. They're just going to play ball in hand. There's no reason for them not to do it when they have over an inch of rain in the forecast. So if it's going to be ball in hand, that's why I'm pretty comfortable with the scoring staying where it is about last year, even though the winds are going to kick up. Now, there's variance behind whether they use lift, clean, and place or not. That's not a 100% certainty. That's just what I'm assuming happens tomorrow. Now, and I've been wrong about that before, of course. I've been right about it way more often than I've been wrong, but I'm by no means perfect with anything that I do. So that kind of variance scares me off of when entering a whole bunch of different shit. But then also this afternoon wind. If it is blowing 30 miles an hour, you can see it 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. They're calling for 35-mile-an-hour winds towards the very end of the afternoon. Let's say that they have a delay. They might not finish the round until the very end of the day. It's going to blow 32 miles an hour. It says if it actually blows that hard, maybe it could play slightly harder than what you had here. But let's say that it doesn't blow at all. There's also the off chance, they happened on Sunday at last week's event, where they thought it was going to blow 40 miles an hour, and then it doesn't blow at all for the first 3 hours. By the way, I can't think of a more tilting thing to happen from the weather perspective than what happened on Sunday. But if that happens tomorrow afternoon, then scores could be nuclear low at this sort of a golf course. So that's why I don't think it's the best slate to play, because truly the scoring average could be anywhere between even par and like -3 tomorrow. And I would not be that surprised in either direction. It just completely depends on whether that wind comes through, whether they do lift clean in place, whether there's a delay in play. I mean, something else that could even happen, guys, is the guys that are going off later towards midday. Let's say that they stop play and they don't actually end up starting till midday. Well, that means that those guys that were supposed to start at like midday or 1 are now going to tee off at 4 and are probably going to play half the round on Friday. Well, what does the weather on Friday look like? Absolutely perfect. A little cool towards the very beginning of the day, but no wind whatsoever. So that's why I think it's one to limit your unit size, not to go too crazy on it. And I guess if you are going to enter anything, positive stance plays would be the way to go about it. Because if we get lift clean in place, maybe the delays even help us out, right, and give us, a finish on Friday morning. It could play even easier than what we had last year. And when we take a look at the boards, it's priced pretty much the same as what we had for last year. So the value that I ended up seeing was mostly on better. They had a few things on underdog that I was willing to take as well. Unfortunately, everything that I already took on underdog bumped within like 25 minutes of me taking it, just because they're absolutely scared of everything I have to enter. But I believe Prize Picks might still have some of them on there. So for example, an Akshay Bhatia at 70 half strokes was something that I ended up entering. But let me see if they have the fairway one that I ended up taking on here too. Let's see. They might not, but let's see. So they do. They have them on there at 7.5. Like, here's are 2 props that I took on underdog already. And, we're going to point out a couple slips here that you might want to tail, but don't go crazy on these unit-wise. I went for just a regular 1 unit a piece on these 2 bets. And that's what I'm going to do for round 1. If we cash one of our 2 bets, we'll be into the positive. If we don't, we'll be down 2 units. And it won't be the worst in either direction. I'm just not going to overexpose myself on this kind of a slate. I believe the one that I took was a 3-man, by the way, on underdog, but that third prop isn't available because they don't even have a green regulation board up. And that's what I ended up taking. But here's the thought process on these 2. At an Akshay under at 70.5, because I think the scoring average could be around -1. That was the scoring average last year. And I think with lift clean in place, that's probably about where I would put it. And Akshay is coming in on a heater. He's coming in with a 3rd place, also a 6th place finish the week before that. So 2 top 6 finishes in a row. He's a good POA putter, and he's really hitting the ball well as well. So just asking him to have about an average day feels appropriate if we get about that -1 scoring average. And then to go to the Robert McIntyre one, the average last year was about 7.5 fairways per round, but I think that's going to go up with the wet conditions. And the other thing to add on top of it is that if it's lift clean in place, these players are going to be prioritizing hitting the short stuff as well. When you hit the short stuff is actually when you can give yourself a better lie. If you hit the ball in the first cut or the rough, you don't get that same kind of advantage. So players like McIntyre that might typically be more aggressive might choose to be a little bit more positional on a lift clean in place round, so that you can take advantage of the rolls and get them into your favor. So that's why I like that over on McIntyre, because he was at last year's average, and he was an above average accuracy guy. He was about 70 on tour in accuracy last season, which is slightly above average in that category. And then Akshay, with his kind of form over the last couple events, you'd have to say that he grades out as an above average player as well. So I did not take these on Prize Picks. They're just available there now. I got them on underdog instead. A couple other props I took, I'm not even sure if these are going to be available on Prize Picks because I took these other ones on better. And who was it? It was Xander. Do we have him up? So we don't have the Xander prop to take. That's not even available. It was a birdie or better line that I got on him. And then who was the other one? I believe it was now my memory's not getting me. Was it Jordan Spieth? Yeah, it was, right? Maybe it was Jordan. No, it was not Jordan Spieth. It was Chris Gotterup. What the hell am I saying? I do like Jordan Spieth round 1, but I did not take him for that prop. It was an under on Chris Gotterup strokes. So the other side of it is not available. That would have been the Xander prop. That was an over on 4 birdies, if you're curious about it. But this Gotterup under at 70 was also something that I played. And the push equity that you're getting at 70 was part of it. He is down at 69.5 on most of the major sports books. But if I think the average is going to be about a -1 scoring average, and you've got Gotterup that's playing unbelievable golf over the last month, taking him to push that average or just have a slightly better than average day in cover felt like a pretty reasonable lean. But now that Xander's not available on the board, that kind of takes away the equity from that. And I guess you can make it a 3-man with those first ones that we entered, or I guess you could go to the Spieth prop. I did not enter this Jordan Spieth prop, but I want to throw it in there as the pairing because it was something that I almost ended up playing myself. And here's why I like these two in particular too. It's not just that they're, above average players, guys that had grade well to shoot at least -1. Jordan, by the way, if he has an average day and shoots -1, or at least about the scoring average I'm expecting of probably around -1 in most cases, he can just match that and cover for us. But these guys are late tee times. So let's go to the strokes board so I can show you that. And scroll down here to the bottom. Goddard's going off at 2:25 p.m. Eastern. Jordan Spieth's even later. He's going off at 2:49 p.m. Eastern time, which means they're going off just before noon over there on the West Coast. And if you take a look at the forecast, they're calling for a lot of those heavy rains early in the day. Now, if they have to play through the rain in the morning, I think that that's actually going to be more problematic than maybe the winds in the afternoon will be. That's just my personal take on it. Like, if you had to make me guess which side would play harder, if they had to play through it, it would be the front side that plays harder because they have to play through that downpour. But here's also why I like the PMT times. If they don't play through it, let's say that they have to add a 2 to a 3 hour delay, and that's very possible with them getting over an inch of rain in that morning alone. Well, that means that these guys are going to be playing either late into the day or even into Friday morning. We've already touched on this, but Friday morning looks absolutely beautiful. And even if they are playing late into Thursday, they're not going to have the rain to deal with, and it will be a bit windy, but these are both really good wind players. Like, that was part of the idea with Chris Goddard. Goddard won the Sony Open in the wind and then played well at the Waste Management when the wind kicked up towards the end. You have Jordan Spieth, who's known as one of the best wind players that you have in the world. That would be another way to go after those two. And they're on what I think may be the proper side of conditions, but it's still sketchy. There's not going to be a big edge for props in round one, in my opinion. So that's why I'm going late on it to begin with. But that is my 2 cents from that perspective. And, what I'm personally going to do and how I handle a lot of these slates myself is that I will just wake up early tomorrow morning. I'll get my cup of coffee. Luckily, it's on the West Coast, so I don't have to wake up too early. I can actually wake up pretty late, get my coffee, and then get into my process. But we'll see what some of the early scoring looks like. We'll see if the rain looks like it's actually going to stop play, because as you guys know with the rain, like, the forecast for rain the day ahead of time might not be an exact science. But like, when we get to the morning of, and then you bring up the weather app and then we type in Pacific Palisades, which is where this golf tournament is, like, we can see when the rain's coming. Like, it'll show up on the weather app. We can use that information to really take advantage from the prop side on whether it's maybe going to play easier or harder than we're expecting. We can see what they're doing with tee boxes. We're also going to get the pin locations a little bit later on. And I think it's one, at least for round number 1 at this event, to attack from the live betting perspective. And, when the wind gets a little bit calmer, then also when the rain gets out of there after tomorrow, Friday through Sunday will probably be a bit of a different story, more of a traditional slate for us to attack from that perspective. But we've got to have an adaptable process. You got to be willing to change what you're doing for any given round to best take advantage of the stuff that you have in front of you. And that's personally how I think the slate's going to bear out, or at least how I hope it ends up bearing out for us. But if you guys want to see every single slip that I'm taking, you guys can find that on the Patreon page. Golf prop and betting tiers, how you get access to all of that. Everything I'm entering on Prize Picks, Underdog, also Better. We've been doing a lot of stuff over there lately. You can find all of that on the Patreon, but also all the stat averages that we have for these events. You guys can see that right there. You have the PGA at the top, also DP World Tour at the very bottom, and also weather reports for all these events as well, so that you have all the information that you need to do your research process, to find value on those boards, and not just from the pick'em sites like we've already gone through, but also on some of the sports books too. And to cap off this live stream, before I go over any last second questions that you guys had for props and betting, let's go through a bet or two that I took for the first round. And we're going to do it with a head-to-head matchup. Let's go with Theegala versus Pearson Coody. And I really do like Pearson Coody this week. Like, don't get me wrong. He was a value play for me in DFS because it's on the ball striking form that he has heading in. But experience plays around this track. And Theegala has been playing pretty well himself. I mean, he's had some top finishes. He's made some cuts, which he hadn't been doing for quite a long time. And long-term, Sahith is the better player between these two. I know Coody's been, the hot name on the market, the guy that's really started off 2026 with a bang, but he has no experience at this track. Sahith has experience and also a top 5 finish to his name at Riviera Country Club. And we're getting Theegala at +110. And by the way, this is the one with the ties and no bet. So you're not going to get screwed if they end up finishing at the same score. A tie would mean that you end up getting your money back. Give me that +110 all day. So that's what I ended up betting for one of my round 1 bets. And in fact, I can give you the other one, but we could also do a tournament matchup. That might be another good way to go about it. let's see if I can find the tournament matchup that we ended up taking. Actually, let's go with a 3-ball instead. Let's scroll down and take that one because it brings in Ludwig Gobert, and I'm going to point this one out as well. Let's see, it should be the second one that shows up. That's on the 3-ball format. And then I also like Ludwig Gobert at plus 225. So Gobert's somebody that's got some upside. I thought he might have been injured a few weeks back, but I took him for an outright this week as well. But it's going up against JJ Spawn and Hideki Matsuyama, and this 225 number is closer to plus 200 on a lot of other sports books. So if you can find this plus 225, this is also the market where a tie, I think, still pays out. It won't be a loss, that's for sure, on this 3-ball sort of format. But this plus 225 is significantly better than Draftkings and Fanduel. And it makes sense because I really like Luddy this week. I was already mind shopping a lot of his props because I think this is a really good bounce back spot for him. He played well rounds 2 through 4 last week. He had one of the best scoring averages over the last 3 events, or last 3 rounds, I should say. He gained about 2.75 shots gained per round from Friday through Sunday at Pebble. And it was all at Pebble Beach. So he played the same golf course, a golf course that didn't really fit his game either. But now he gets to play a golf course which is tailor-made for the bomber like himself. Somebody that carries the ball a long way. He's also a really good iron player that can throw darts. So you're telling me that we're getting Luddy at a course that he should play really well at. I know he's the defending champion, but it was a different course, right? So that's not why I'm saying he's a good course fit. I'm saying he's a good course fit because of his off the tee play and iron play, which is tailor-made for this sort of a track. And you're getting a buy low spot on him because he's looked quote unquote terrible the last couple of weeks. Didn't really look terrible the last 3 days last week. And that's what I really care about is his momentum heading into this event. In long term, this is somebody that, I mean, last year, if somebody said, oh, we're getting Luddy as the 3rd favorite against JJ Spawn and Hideki Matsuyama, people would have told you were crazy 6 months ago. They would have said, what are you talking about in August? Luddy Gobert would be the 3rd favorite there. They would have thought that he would have been the number 1 favorite. And that would have been the case even after JJ Spawn won the US Open, right? Like everyone would have thought that Ludwig Gobert would be at the top end of that group. And now he's the 3rd player in that group when it comes to the odds. Talk about an overreaction if I've ever seen one before. So I ended up betting that, ended up betting the Sahith Theegala prop as well, and also another head-to-head for round number 1. So on top of the pick'em stuff we've gone through, you guys can also find some of those head-to-heads on the Patreon page as well. Not only the bets, but also all the thought process behind it so that you can see how to find value, how to structure your bets to be a long-term profitable bettor. And you're not going to find a better resource than myself. Not only do we have a quality plays, quality ROI already to start 2026, but I'm completely banned off of these different pick'em sites. I mean, Prize Picks, my latest account now can't even deposit onto the website. I had to deposit because I only had like $20 on there because they got me to $5 slips. And it was after Sunday and we lost like 3 slips. So like I ran out of money on there, which hadn't happened in like a year, but I only had like $20 on there because of the $5 slips. And now they won't even let me reload the account with more money. So, you know, whenever they end up banning you from the books, they won't even let you play on it because your ROI is so high. I mean, it's one thing to put you at $5 slips, right? Because that's the maximum for like promos, the free square promos that they're putting out for players that are good. That was my max for everything for about 1.5 years, 2 years. Now I can't even play there at all. You don't want to get your advice from the guys that are getting $10,000 bonus bets, $10,000 promo bets like you're seeing from these accounts on Twitter. I know it looks like those people win. I know it looks like those people are, you know, the people that you want to tail because they're playing for 50 to 60 grand. But you know why they're able to do that sort of thing is because they're long-term donators. They know that people tailing their plays on Twitter are going to be profitable for their website long-term. So much so that they can hand out bonus bets like that, like their candy for $10,000 because they know they're going to win more back on it on the other side. You're not going to get that here. It's the exact opposite on my channel. You're finding somebody that the sports books absolutely hate. And, you know, when I was getting into this space, that's what I wanted to be, right? Is the person that all the sports books hated because they were teaching the people how to go out there and make money for themselves. So if you want to be a part of that mission, that process that we have here on the channel, then we'd love to have you. Whether you're a part of the live streams for free, it's obviously a huge part of the community right there. We appreciate all of you guys for watching the content and showing your support. If you haven't already smashed that like button, by the way, first off, go ahead and do so. That's a great way to show your support here in the community. But also all of our members over there on the Patreon page, that's my mission as well, right? Is to make you guys better long-term bettors. You can tail my exposure. That's, part of the process for sure, but also so that you can start placing bets for yourself and given the sports books hell from your own perspective. So that's our goal here. Hopefully you guys feel a little bit more prepared for your round one exposure now that you've watched this live stream. But let's go through any bets, any questions in the chat that you guys are curious about. We're going to go ahead and round it off with that. But for anything else that we're going with on this week, you guys can find that on the Patreon page. The DFS tier is where you guys can find the spreadsheet from before. That's everything for fantasy. And then the prop and the betting tier, as we mentioned, is where you guys can find all that exposure. But let me get a sip of this water. My mouth is getting a little bit dry. And let's finish it up with those questions that you may or may not have. Let's see. So trying to figure out where we left off so that we don't skip anything. I believe it was about here. He said, you love the deep dive and appreciate all of the insights. Good luck to everyone playing DFS. Amen to that. Maybe Xander for the one and done. He said, sorry for the last guy that you're stuck between. And yeah, you're looking at one and done on a Xander. So he's kind of just a guy for me this week. Like, I actually would have liked Xander more of last week than what we have at this golf tournament. I think his well-rounded skill set of gaining across all four stat categories makes him a better play than Hideki is. If I had to rank your three that you've pointed out, right, between Xander, Hideki Matsuyama, and Patrick Cantlay, I would go Cantlay, Xander, and then Hideki would be how I'd rank those three. And of the ownership component, Cantlay is going to be by far the most popular of the three that you picked. So if you want to be sneakier about it, voice crack of hell right there, huh? If you want to be sneakier about it, though, what I was trying to say was Xander Schauffele would probably be the way to go about it because he's still quality play, but you're not going to be sharing him with as many people. So like there could be some upside to that. Our preferred lives announced on the PGA.com's Twitter. They sure are. They usually do it just before play starts, or they do it just as play starts itself. So keep an eye on that tomorrow morning. If the first round does get delayed, would that give the PM guys an advantage? Yeah, it depends on how long the delay is. If it's only an hour, probably plays pretty flat. If it's like a 3 or a 4 hour delay and they have to finish up on Friday, I think that would be where you get the advantage towards the PM guys. He said, late to the game, but wonder what my thoughts are on Simu. No need for a deep dive, just thoughts would be great. And also, you subscribe to the Patreon today. Let's go. First off, glad to have you, the Breeze. Welcome on to the crew. And yeah, you don't want a full deep dive, but I'm going to give you some thoughts on Simu Kim. Course fit perspective, 8 out of 10. We want guys that are good off the tee and good on approach. And what has Simu Kim done this year? He's been a straighter in both categories. In fact, of the approach play metrics, I don't have the metrics up in front of me. You asked for, not a full deep dive, but he's top 5 in the field in shots gained approach. I was going to check to see exactly what he ranked, but top 5 is good enough on that. So yeah, I like that perspective from it. However, and it's a big however, because the course history does matter here, is he hasn't done anything at Riviera. The last time he played here, it was a T44. He missed the cut the time before that. He ended up finishing 73rd the time before that. That's a bit of a red flag. And in fact, I think it's such a big red flag for people that the ownership's lower than it should be. So, I could see buying low on him because he's just somebody that's a stud compared to the guys around him. How do I feel about Hovland under on 70? So I ended up taking Goddard instead, but Hovland could have been that same sort of player. The difference, though, is that Hovland's teeing off a bit earlier. So I preferred the later guys just in case we get that advantage that we actually just had the question about with Kim there. But Hovland would be an okay play. I love him in general this week, so not too much pushback there. You got McGreevy over Finau, Scheffler over Xander, and Hideki over JJ are some matchup locks. Well, there's no such thing as a lock in golf, so I think that's a bit silly. But do I think that those could be decent leans? It depends on the odds that you're getting. I will say that, of those 3 different matchups, that obviously Scheffler over Xander is the one that you're going to feel the best about, but it's almost certainly the one that you're paying the most juice on as well. So you have to let me know the odds, man. That's the biggest component about betting. With the Sahith Theegala at plus 110 that I got, it's not like I think he's the best player in the field or anything. He's far from it. But at plus money against somebody that's a kind of sketchy player too, it's a good bet. Whereas, there could be a world where Xander, even though Xander is clearly the inferior player to a Scheffler, where the play is actually Xander because of the kind of odds that you're getting. So try to incorporate the odds where you can. I can give you some better feedback if you do. You're looking for feedback on Goddard? You're looking at him in DFS, you'll have to let me know. I kind of gave some thoughts before, though. It's a good off the tee fit, a good approach fit as well. I do worry about the putting at times. You're looking at Berger and over at 70.5. I personally like the positive stance plays a little bit more. I know that there's some wind in the forecast, but lift, clean, and place at a golf course like this really matters. It could be even like a stroke and a half to a 2-stroke difference. So I would stick to the positive stance plays, at least until we see conditions tomorrow. If they don't announce lift, clean, and place, if it ends up playing to, let's say, harder pin locations than we're expecting, then maybe, but that's not personally where I'm heading right now. Any birdie or better matchups that catch my eye? Nope. I looked at the board, and it's very rare that one catches my eye anyways. Who are my favorite first-round matchups? You seem to be pretty locked in on these from slate to slate. There was a couple there that I just pointed out, but that is something that I post for my Patreon members. So if you want to see what I'm betting for any of these matchups, that is always the place to find that. Any Eurogolf stuff catching my eye looks to be a fairly calm round one. So yeah, I was looking at the Eurogolf board. I will give you my thoughts, but nothing caught my eye. I guess to slightly disappoint you, but it's the truth. Nothing on here was obvious value. I thought maybe the birdie or better board was the way to go about it because there's like 3 drivable par 4s. It's at elevation in Kenya. The course is sub 7,000 yards to begin with, and you already have some par 5s. But the sportsbook odds were all about even money at these 4.5s. And like, it's a really weak field too. Like your best players are guys like a Henny Duplessis and then a Thurston Lawrence. So kind of crazy to me that like anyone would even be at 4.5. Like they have some scrubs on here, like guys that are hardly even on the DP World Tour at 4.5 birdies. So I think positive stance plays is likely the proper direction. However, because the players all suck, I didn't end up getting to any myself. And I don't want to say they all suck because Alejandro Del Rey was somebody I actually bet outright on the DP World Tour this week. But like even him at 4.5 birdies, I don't know if I could play that for a 50-50 prop. He was like minus 120 towards the over on DraftKings. I know conditions look relatively calm, but the other thing to kind of keep in mind too is that this was a par 71 the last time they played it. It's a par 70 this time. They've changed that aspect since the last time they played it in 2021. So that birdie average is likely going to drop a bit. It's probably going to drop to 3.75 per round. Now, the conditions might be a bit easier this time. So maybe that does slightly mitigate that difference and keep it closer to like 3.8, 3.9 per round. But one less par 5 opportunity is going to have an impact on what these players do. And I'm not necessarily sure that the sports books have accounted for that yet. So that's why I'm going to stay away from it. It's anytime we haven't seen a course in 5 years, it's a little sketchy. And especially on the DP World Tour, I try to stay plugged in as I possibly can on golf. But I'm a little bit more plugged in on the PGA Tour side as opposed to overseas. You got the top 40 at plus 120. I went with the top 20, and that was at plus 450. The plus 120 for the top 40 does not feel like the best odds, but I guess if you don't have the top 20 available, that could be usable. He said, that makes so much sense. You said, Luke, you're the GOAT. No, you are, Jose. Thanks for stopping in on as per usual. Hey, you joined earlier today too, Lime. I did see that. Welcome to the community as well, man. Are you looking at a Cootie under 70.5? I was line shopping that myself. So I think you're on to something at looking at that. And I mentioned that positive stance plays were probably the way to go about it. But I ended up taking somebody like Bhatia instead, just because Bhatia has better POA numbers. I mean, he's got similar POA numbers to Cootie, I guess. They're both up there from that perspective. So yeah, I could see it. I was trying to like think of like, oh, why is Bhatia better than Cootie? But he's really not. They're essentially the same play. So if I like Bhatia, I probably like Cootie too. And that's why I was line shopping it. So I guess the only difference is that I bet one and I didn't bet the other, huh? He said, Jay Hood says Hisatune top 20. I took it last week. I'm not going back to it here. I don't think it's as good of a fit for Rio. The form is still there, though. He's still playing unbelievable golf. The X factor, and I think what might keep him a little bit down this week, is that it's not as good of an off-the-tee fit. So I'm going to try and buy him at the Florida swing at some of the more positional golf courses. He said no tie. He's got Hideki at minus 135, and then no tie Max at minus 130. And you said those are all on Hard Rock Bet, okay? With those matchups that you were looking at before. Let me give you some quick thoughts on those. So you got Hideki minus 135, and that's over JJ Spawn. I think that's probably priced appropriately. Hideki should be the favorite because of the form, but JJ Spawn isn't somebody that you can overlook. You've got Max is minus 130 versus Finau.
Finau's been playing well, so I'd probably stay away from that one too. If they were all like minus 110s, I might actually bet them, but not minus 130, minus 135 juice. That feels about appropriate. And then only minus 155 on Scotty. Now, that's the one that stands out to me. Like, if you were going to eat the minus 130 juice, I would just rather eat the minus 150 some juice at that point and take Scotty Scheffler. Because, like, yeah, I know it's Xander. He's not a complete pushover, but Scotty's the man, so I can get behind that. You got Goddard up over 3.5 birdies at even money. Take it or fade it. If I could get Goddard up at even money at 3.5, I would bet that in a heartbeat. So I think you got a great bet there, Mason. I would not cash it out. I would definitely let that one ride. What's going on, Antonio? He said, sorry, you're super late. Hey, better to have you late than never. You'll watch the stream from the beginning. All good. Let me know if you have any questions after the fact, and I'll try and get back to you. He said, appreciate it, man. Yeah, the ownership on Cantlay is the only thing. If you're playing from ahead, Mike, it's not a big problem to play a popular guy in your one and done. But if you've started kind of cold, maybe you don't have a top 5 or a win yet, then you do have to think about that. So yeah, maybe that helps guide your decision there. Real quick question. What am I doing with Colin? I'm not a big Colin guy this week, and I think it could be to my detriment. There's just a couple guys in this range that I like a little bit more in DFS. From the outright betting perspective, I like the distance off the tee thing. So that's keeping me off of a Morikawa. But I'm going to be, clenching the butt cheeks a little bit because, I feel like Colin Morikawa could have himself a week. Especially he's the kind of guy that gets on heaters at times and can ride that momentum. But I think the proper move and what I'm doing in my exposure is probably taking the wait and see approach. So it's going to be a sweaty one, not one that you feel that good about heading into the slate staying away. But that's my take. I just feel like the longer golf course, the fact that it's going to be pretty dreary for round number 1 could work against him a bit. And of course, him winning for the first time in forever, right? That's a bit of an emotional release. Sometimes that works against players too. And then they got my guy, Alex Escobar, in the chat as well. Welcome on in, my dude. And yeah, just about the end of the live stream. So unfortunate with your timing in there, but it's my guy Dinger Bets, by the way. He's a big baseball guy that you have on X/Twitter. Highly recommend checking out his stuff if you haven't already. But that's all I've got here in the live stream. Best luck with everything that you guys are going with. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss anything to come. That will include our round 2 through 4 live streams covering props and showdown over the weekend to come. And if you guys enjoyed this round 1 preview, we'll be going to even more deep details over the next few days. That'll include shots gained metrics, weather, how that'll impact the next couple rounds, matchup bets on all the different sports books as well. So stay tuned for all of that. But that's all I've got. A little bit cooked over here on the East Coast. It's been a long week of dip diving through the weeds, deep diving all these shots gained metrics to get ready. But super stoked for them to hit the sounding gun tomorrow to get the round started, and hopefully for us to have ourselves a week. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support here on the channel. And to see you guys tomorrow night for that live stream.